Hey, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode of Mavens of Data. Not because it's my first time hosting, that's exciting too, but because we've got Chris Dutton here ready to talk to us about his journey and his experiences as the founder of Maven Analytics. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
And thank you. It's fun being on this side of the curtain for a change.
You want to do a quick intro about yourself to the folks in the audience?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of people joining probably know something about me. Founder, head of product at Maven Analytics. I don't need to go into the details. We're an online learning platform that really focuses on helping data professionals launch or accelerate their careers.
Awesome. Chris, why don't you take us all the way back to the beginning? What got you into data analytics in the first place?
Awesome. Yeah. So we're talking about how I first fell in love with data analytics. I suppose we need to go all the way back to my college life. I was never one of those people who had my career path mapped out. A bunch of my friends, colleagues, peers knew that they were going to be a doctor, they were going to go into law, they were going to study psychology. I was pretty undecided until probably my second year of college. And I remember sitting down on my brother-in-law's couch talking about what the heck I should study and major in. And he was actually the one who recommended economics and statistics. And I really didn't know much about economics at the time. But the more I learned, the more I realized this would be a pretty cool option, right? You learn how to solve problems. You learn how to use data to make models. You learn how the world works. And it felt like a pretty safe bet, right? Give me a versatile skill set if I want to go into consulting, finance, whatever it might be. So I started kind of diving into econ courses, micro, macro, econometrics, which is basically data science before they were calling it that. And I really wasn't that fired up about it, to be honest. Like it wasn't quite hitting until about a year and a half later, my junior year, when I enrolled in a course called sabermetrics. And for anyone who's not aware, sabermetrics is the statistical analysis of baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan, played my whole life. We had Red Sox games streaming on the TV my whole childhood. And this was a brand new course taught by a visiting lecturer from Boston University. And so I was really excited about this course. And that course changed my life in so many ways. But the biggest thing about it was that for the first time, I was taking these kind of abstract concepts and tools and techniques that I was learning in these economics courses and applying them to something that I knew and understood at a really deep level and was passionate about. Up to that point, it was like spending time doing assignments, trying to forecast profit margin for Acme Inc., or calculating price elasticity for widgets and like just dense textbook stuff that was not getting me excited. And this was the first time where I was like, whoa, these tools can actually be used to solve problems that are interesting and exciting to me. Like now I was using the same regression models, the same statistical techniques to forecast, how a hitter would perform the next season, or try to quantify the impact of like weather or ballpark dimensions on a player's performance. And that stuff was so fun to work on that it just like ignited this passion and made me realize like, okay, like data analytics is pretty cool. It's amazingly versatile and broadly applicable. And I could see this being part of my life for a very long time. So I think that was the moment that I kind of realized data analytics would be a great fit for me. And kind of fun anecdote there, out of that class, I was so excited about it that a peer and I co-founded this group called Baseball Analysis at Tufts, BAT or BAT. That's A+
Nice.
Thing right there. And the whole point of the group was to come up with really interesting questions about baseball and use statistical techniques to try to answer or research them. And it was a ton of fun. We actually co-wrote some papers that got published. And that colleague, that classmate, went on to intern with the Tampa Bay Rays right after graduating, climbed his way up the entire organizational ladder up to general manager. And now I think he's president of baseball ops for the Mavens, I think. And there have been I think 2 or 3 other people from that same class who are now in very high up leadership roles in front office roles for MLB teams, which is cool. So that program was a ton of fun, and it really is the turning point in my life where analytics became a big focus for me.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, especially so, I mean, you studying economics because you like that sort of work. You started getting more into it because you found something that you could apply it to that was, relevant or exciting to you, like baseball. And then everyone you kind of worked with at the time went on to do that with baseball. Not you, though. So, I mean, did you know that back then, like, did you see your career panning out the way you did? Did you always think that you were going to, start teaching or start your own business?
No, no. If anything, I had dreams of being the general manager of the Red Sox.
Yeah.
Not a huge surprise. And who knows, maybe that ship hasn't quite sailed. Maybe like the next phase of my career, I'll take a stab at that. But no, it's interesting. It's not that I like never wanted to teach or be an entrepreneur, but I certainly never planned on it. And it's kind of interesting. I suppose this is a good segue into like how I ended up being an educator and an entrepreneur full time. So once I knew that analytics was the right fit for me, I started looking at jobs senior year, and I found an opportunity at a marketing firm, an ad agency in Boston. It's called Digitas. And they were known for not only their creative and marketing work, but also their focus on strategy and analytics. And this is like, I'm going to date myself here, this is like 15 years ago. So a company like that, an ad agency that really leveraged data and analytics and data science, like that was a big differentiator for them. Today, it's kind of table stakes, but that was a big deal. And that's what drew me to Digitas back in those days. So I landed that job. And one of the most fortunate things about that first position is that I came on board to replace a senior analyst who was like this absolute Excel badass. Like when I started that job, if you asked me to rate my own skills, scale of 1 to 10, I would have confidently told you I was like a solid 8. Yeah. And I laugh now because everyone says that. Like you ask anyone in the world and they're like an 8 or a 9 in Excel. But realistically, like knowing what I know now, I was probably a 2 or a 3. This guy was legit, and he opened my eyes to what Excel is actually capable of and what a ridiculous powerful platform it was. Even in those days, like we're talking about like much tighter row limitations. There's no dynamic arrays. There's no Power Query. There's no Lambdas, anything like that. But even with the tools we had, we were building some crazy stuff. So he was going to leave the company in 2 weeks, which means that I had this tiny window of onboarding where I basically had to like absorb everything I could from this guy, reverse engineer all these tools and models that he had built so that I could maintain and evolve and use them moving forward. And it was like total trial by fire. Like I was every day I would realize like how much I actually didn't know. And I would just learn and dissect these reports and figure out how all these nested functions and VBA macros were working. And I loved it. Like it just sparked this curiosity and this passion for Excel. And I totally fell in love with Excel at that moment, as nerdy as it is to say something like that. It felt intuitive to me. It felt natural to me. And I wanted to just sink my teeth in and go as deep as I could. And the reason why that was such a pivotal moment for me is that it helped me build a reputation as an expert and as a specialist at the agency, to the point where I became like the Excel help desk, right? And this is a big company. There are like 800 people just in the Boston office. And every day people would come by, not just in the data group, but also people in finance and HR and marketing and even senior leadership. And they would bring me their toughest Excel problems. And I just relished the chance to help them solve it because it kept me really sharp and it earned me some favors with people and colleagues, which was nice. But the big tipping point was that the reputation that I had been building earned me the opportunity to then build a training program and an onboarding course for all the new analysts that would be hired at the agency. And that was my first exposure to teaching and to instructional design. And it was nerve-wracking because at that point in time, I hated public speaking. I hated presenting and standing in front of a room talking to people. So it's like terrifying at first, but I recognized that it was probably a good opportunity to get outside the comfort zone and to stretch a little bit. And it was amazingly rewarding. And I realized that this kind of was my flow state in a lot of ways. I had a lot of fun designing materials, coming up with the demos and the case studies, and then delivering that content and seeing people's eyes light up when they start to finally understand a topic that had felt really complex or abstract up to that point. That was so rewarding and so powerful. And I think those moments like that helped me realize that teaching was something that I wanted to make part of my life, really moving forward.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think what I love most about that is, I mean, you knew you liked Excel and you kind of go in here and you think you're this expert, right? And then all of a sudden you're not. But the reaction there isn't to kind of shy away from it and think, oh, I can't do this. But to your point, right, trial by fire, and you just kept challenging yourself to figure out, these complex workbooks that your colleague had made, and then, all right, start teaching. I don't like, public speaking, but I'm going to, put myself in uncomfortable situations. And I think the fact that you kind of sought that out so often in a subject that you were passionate about anyway, is just this great like reinforcement to keep improving, where it can be very kind of easy to just rest on your laurels and call it a day. And to that point, I mean, then you were still teaching, I guess, in a live format, right? You weren't, creating any online courses. So when did that pivot take place, where you kind of decided, all right, I'm teaching maybe a couple hundred people now. I know we've got over 1 million students now. So when did you transition to releasing courses just to the public and online?
So I stayed at that role at Digitas for about six and a half years, and then decided it was time to move on and experience new and different things. Spent a month gallivanting around New Zealand, doing every skydive and bungee jump that I possibly could. Then came back and decided to figure out the next phase of my career. Part of that phase was running my own consulting business to offer analytics and BI services to other companies. And the other big part was to explore this kind of brand new online learning space. And so the first platform that I came across was Udemy. Started to look at what was out there in terms of other Excel and data analytics courses. And to be blunt, the content was terrible. And it made me realize that there's enormous opportunity to teach these concepts better and more effectively than what was out there currently. So really, it was that summer after I left my first job that I really transitioned into the online learning space.
Nice. So, I mean, it kind of seems like then you figured out what it was like to be a good instructor, A, by delivering first live, B, by looking at the online landscape, realizing there weren't really many good instructors out there. So what would you say then you thought that it took to become a successful instructor, or what led you to become one and kind of stand out for the pack and start to become successful? And what was it like just creating those first courses? I know from experience, it can be very challenging.
Yeah, you know better than anyone, Enrique. You've done quite a few yourself. Let me just say that, I think I'm proud of where I've gotten to as an instructor and an educator today. But I was not a great instructor or a natural instructor in the early days. I stumbled around, I fumbled through it, I made a ton of mistakes, did a lot of things wrong. But by making mistakes, I learned, I got better, I improved, I got student feedback. You ask what the experience was in the early days of those first few courses. Looking back at my first few courses, I feel shame and embarrassment because I just look at the old me from 10, 12, 15 years ago, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so cringy. Like, what are you doing? But I suppose that's a good thing, because if you don't look back at your MVP, if you will, with a little bit of embarrassment, probably means that you haven't evolved much since then. So I've told this story a few times, but it's fun reminiscing about it. My very first course, Excel formulas and functions, I recorded that course on this borrowed laptop that was like falling apart. It sounded like a jet engine firing up every time I turned it on. I tried to buy a microphone and I got like the total wrong kind of microphone for the job. The acoustics were terrible. So I ended up like moving a lamp, like a stand-up lamp next to me, and draping this heavy like fleece blanket over. And I would be crouched in the middle of summer in this tiny like dark cave, trying to like deliver demos on a keyboard and speak into the mic and nail the scripts, sweat like pouring down my face. And it was horrible, but I learned a lot about like what to do and more importantly, what not to do. One mistake that I made that I'll never make again is that I told you I'm a big baseball fan, right? So yeah. I was like, what better way to introduce some like course lessons and demos than use baseball data, right? RBIs, stolen bases, home runs. Turns out when you're teaching to a global audience, not everyone knows what those acronyms mean. So I get a lot of questions about what the heck are you talking about? What is AVG or slugging or home run? So that was like just one tangible example about like knowing your audience, knowing how to teach in a way that's approachable to people from all sorts of areas of the world. So as far as like what I think makes a successful instructor, it's a very rare and unique blend of skills. You have to be, I think, an exceptional communicator. You have to have the technical ability, of course. You have to be creative. You have to be patient. You have to be driven because these courses are really, really hard to produce. And I don't think, unless you've gone through it, it's tough to really wrap your head around what it's like. And I think the closest comparison I can draw is that it's like writing a book and then having to perform that book as flawlessly as you possibly can. And, as you know, Enrique, and I see some of our other instructors in the chat as well, but this is like typically 300, 400, 500 hours of effort. You're recording hundreds of lessons in front of the mic. And so self-motivation and drive is such a critical part of being a good instructor and being cut out for this, because you have to be able to break down this huge problem into small, manageable steps to get through it. And not everyone's cut out for it, but luckily we have an unbelievable team of instructors here that I think check all those boxes.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny you mentioned those kind of difficult recording conditions getting started. I remember when I was recording my first course, it was summer here in Hermosillo in Mexico. So we get like over 40 degrees Celsius, about 120-ish Fahrenheit. But the AC would just like mess up the audio in all of my takes. Like I couldn't get the noise removal working. So I would have to turn it off whenever I'd record, and I'd just be sweating in my room trying to get through these like sometimes like 20-minute takes. It's hard to get through, especially when you're putting together 8-10 hour courses. I love it. And I also love that you mentioned earlier that, at first you think, oh, I'm this Excel expert already. I mean, I use it all the time, 8 or 9. Right. And I remember even when I reached out to you to create my first course, that's what I felt about myself. I took your Power Query course and we'll get into that later, and then, the pitch was that I would record the first few courses, right? Starting with formulas and functions. I had never actually taken that course from yours because I thought I was above it. But naturally I had to take it because I had to make it, right? Record it myself. And I remember going through that course and thinking, oh, it was a very big humbling experience for me because like most of that stuff in there, I just flat out didn't know about going in there, all the things you don't know. And that's, I guess, the course that looking back, sometimes you feel the most embarrassment about. So I'd love to ask the audience, actually, because we do get a lot of people that love that formulas course. So I'm going to send out a poll. I'm just going to ask if you have a favorite course from Chris's that you've taken. Let me publish that here. And Chris, do you have a favorite course that you've actually recorded from yours?
I do. I wonder if anyone in the chat can guess what my favorite course is that I've taught. It's one of the relatively recent ones. Oh, Jade, you nailed it immediately. Power BI. Yeah, Power BI desktop, that course has a special place in my heart. And that course has actually been fully rebuilt 3 times now, just because of how much Microsoft has evolved. But um, that course was a tremendous effort to put together. And for anyone who's taken that one, it kind of weaves through an entire project build, kind of through the entire workflow. And it was a very complicated one to produce, but I was super happy with how it came out. So that one has a special place in my heart. But of course, I love all of our courses as well. I can't pick a favorite child, but between us, I think Power BI Desktop is up there for me.
I love it. Looks like it's up there for the audience as well. It's got about 42% of the vote here, although we are getting some love for Power Query in the chat. I have to say that's my personal favorite because it's the first one I took from you, and it's the first one that kind of expanded my mind into what Excel was capable of, and it was kind of the precursor to Power BI because in those days, like Power BI was just getting started. Which leads me to my next question, Chris. So you were already very successful instructor in Udemy. I think you put out your Power BI course, which is your favorite, before you even started Maven Analytics formally. So why even start a business instead of just riding your success as an independent course creator?
Yeah, good question. I have asked myself that question before. I've been curious about what that path would have looked like. I have no regrets about not choosing that path, even though it would have been probably in some ways a safer bet. I think it really comes down to a couple factors. For one, I was kind of running out of topics that I was excited to teach. I'd covered Excel in depth. I covered Power BI. And some people may have different philosophies on this, but it always felt kind of disingenuous to me to try to teach myself new kind of tools and technologies just for the sake of teaching it. I feel like the best courses in the world are the courses that are delivered by the best subject matter experts in the world. And instead of me pretending to be an expert in something like Tableau or SAS or R or Python, where I didn't really have much experience, I'd rather go out and find the best in the world and bring them on board as our instructor. And that's been a core part of our philosophy here at Maven. So that was one factor. Another factor is just the fact that when you earn your entire income through royalties from a third-party platform, that's a risky place to be, right? I've got a family, I've got a mortgage, and there was something a little disconcerting about not having my hands on the wheel when a tiny tweak to the search algorithm or the ranking algorithm or a product change on the platform side could potentially decimate our royalty streams, and that was a little bit scary. So even though the decision to start a business and grow a business had its own set of risks and challenges, that in some ways almost felt like a safer bet in terms of hedging the risk a little bit, diversifying the income, and things like that. But ultimately, the biggest thing that it came down to was I saw an opportunity there that was much bigger than just myself. And I knew that the only regret I might have in my professional life would be not taking a swing and not trying to capitalize on that opportunity. And when I talk about what this opportunity is, content and courses, are quickly becoming commoditized, right? We're in a creator economy. We're in an AI economy. It's easier than ever for people to produce great content, to share it and distribute it, make it available to people around the world. So I don't think it's enough to try to win with just content, at least in the long term. I think the way you win is by creating a uniquely valuable learning experience that helps people achieve a life-changing goal. And that's what we're trying to do at Maven Analytics. And, if I have a question, if I want to know how an inner join works in SQL or the syntax for an XLOOKUP function, there are 10,000 videos out there, all free, that can do a fantastic job answering that question for me. But if I'm an aspiring analyst, or I'm trying to find what the best career path is for me, or I'm trying to build a deep and well-rounded skill set or expertise in a complicated tool or programming language, trying to cobble together my own learning path using 1,000 different free resources is not going to be an effective use of my time. And I think a lot of people, especially those who hesitate to make an investment in something like learning or online content, fail to recognize the opportunity cost because they don't know what they don't know. And taking that path means you're going to have a lot of gaps in your knowledge, you're going to have a lot of redundancy, and you're going to spend way more time than you would by connecting with experts and instructors and coaches and mentors who can hold your hand, personalize a learning plan for you, show you the path. And these are people who are sitting in the seat that you are aspiring to sit into. These are people who have walked the path that you're trying to walk. And by doing that, it just creates a much more personalized, much faster, much more efficient learning experience. And that's the opportunity that we're after here. And that's really the learning environment and experience that we're trying to create for our students.
I love it. Yeah. And there's a few things in there that you mentioned about, not wanting to stay in isolation and also needing experts in the different topics that you wanted to teach so that you didn't have to go out, learn them, teach them yourself, because that felt a little bit ungenuine. So how did that go? How did you start meeting the rest of what has now become the Maven team?
Yeah. So in terms of instructors, actually, where do I even start? It's complicated. So when I started consulting, my first consulting gig was with Jason Russo, who's now our CEO,
Nice.
who's my first full-time hire. He was running his own ad agency called Results Digital. He hired me to stand up a business intelligence practice for his agency. So that's how I met Jason. Worked with him for about 3 years while I was also building courses at the same time. Aaron Perry, our second full-time hire, was also at Results Digital. So that's how we met. And then as I started to expand into different topics, right, other data analytics fields and tools and things like that, I got in touch with John Pauler, who I'd worked with at Digitas. That's where he started his career as well. And love John, always had a huge amount of respect for John as a person, as an analytics specialist. And I brought him on board to teach SQL, and then finally twisted his arm hard enough to come on board full time in a larger kind of growth and marketing role. So that's how those initial connections happened. I like the story about how we met, Enrique, because you came into the company in the same way that many people do, which is through our TA or teaching assistant program. And this was in the early days where I think I had maybe 3 or 4 Excel courses at the time. I was doing well enough to be getting tons of student questions every night. And it was getting tough to manage, to put it simply. And so I was like, I need TAs, I need help to answer these questions. Otherwise, that would become my full-time job. And so instead of just sending a standard application out, I wanted to kind of put people through the ringer a little bit. So I designed an interactive Excel challenge where you had to work through these stages of the challenge and get answers that would unlock the next phase using the tools that we cover in the course. So you'd have to understand functions, you'd have to understand data viz, you'd have to know your way around pivot tables. And ultimately at the end, you get one password, and the application is emailing me that password in the subject line and telling me why you want to be a TA, which was a ton of fun to go through. And you passed the challenge, but it was a little bit late. So I want to hear actually you tell this part of the story from your perspective.
Yeah, I remember going on Udemy one day, probably to continue one of your courses or something else. And I saw the announcement, right? You get these announcements. Maybe I even saw it on my email, like, hey, like you just said, right? Too many students running out of time. I need help. Went through the puzzle just because I thought it'd be fun to challenge myself. ended up completing it. And I just thought, why not? Sent you an email with, I remember the password had to be the subject, and you had to, I think, write why you loved Excel and why you'd think you'd be a good TA. Did that, sent it over. And yeah, I think it was maybe like 10 days after the announcement had been made that I realized it. So I think, and you got back to me pretty quick just saying, oh, thanks, but no thanks. We've already got people hired. And I just thought, well, I tried. That's okay. I completed the challenge. And I don't know how it happened with my mom that I'm telling me to say, like, don't give up there. Just reach out, tell them that you maybe like to translate his courses, try to capture a new, audience, right? So I thought, why not? I'll do that. So I sent you another email. Hey, how about we give this a shot? I remember you got back to me saying, all right, well, pick a lesson from my first course, translate the slides, translate the content, record the whole thing, send it my way, and we'll see if you've got what it takes. A few emails later, and a contract signed, and I was recording the first 3 of your courses. Yeah.
I appreciate the persistence, and I'm glad you didn't let that opportunity pass, because for those of you who don't know, Enrique is now our senior learning experience designer and has taught a number of our courses across Sheets, Excel, statistics, Copilot, and others. So he's been around since the early days.
Yeah, and I mean, now that I guess we're no longer in the early days, Maven Analytics has been a company for a few years. Looking back, what have been some of the notable highs and lows, and what have become sort of the toughest part of your job now, not just as founder, but also, chief product officer and, leader of a bigger pack?
Yeah, I'll say when you make the decision to run a startup, you are buying a ticket for a roller coaster, right? And it goes with the territory. There's going to be highs and lows. I think when I think about the highs, one of the first things that comes to mind is the annual team summit. For those who don't know, we're a fully remote business. We've got people all over the world. Enrique's in Mexico right now. We've got people East Coast, West Coast, Colombia, Germany, and all over the world, which is really awesome. We can talk more about kind of ups and downs of remote work specifically later on if we have time. But when you're interacting with colleagues through Slack and Google Hangouts, it doesn't leave a whole lot of room to get to know them on a deeper personal level, in the same way that it would if you were going to grab a coffee with someone, right? Or grabbing lunch in the office. And so every year, at least once, we try to bring every single person in the company together for 3 or 4 days, talk a little bit of business, of course, and strategy. But I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is just the strengthening of those interpersonal connections and those bonds, and learning about each other, bonding with each other. It goes a long way. And every time I go home from one of those summits, I feel recharged and invigorated and so excited about the future of the business. And we did Austin last year. We did Miami the year before that. We've done San Diego a few times, and starting to plan our next one right now, which is, I'm getting excited just thinking about it. So in terms of highs, that's one of them. We've hit some fun milestones. We made Inc. 5000, one of the fastest growing companies, 2 years ago for the first time. That was like kind of a big personal milestone. Hitting 1 million students on Udemy was mind blowing. Like, there are that many people who love these courses. That was very cool to see. And then, our number one core value as a business is making a real world impact on people's lives. And that's a value that we practice daily, that we live by. It guides the way that we interact with our students, the way we staff our team, the way we build products. And so seeing actual evidence of that happening out in the wild is really cool. We've seen a lot of cases of people who are landing dream jobs because of the courses they've taken, which is awesome. One of the coolest things, we've got kind of a pretty tight community in the Netherlands of students who are like some of our best power users, like Marjolaine, Jonathan, Jeroen. And I think one time they all participated in the same challenge and then started talking and realized they all lived like within an hour of each other. So they like got together and just like grabbed drinks and nerded out about the Maven Analytics courses and challenges and stuff, and took a picture and sent it to me. And that was just such a cool thing to see, like halfway around the world, what our courses in our community, like the connections that it was creating. That was really awesome to see. as far as lows go, there are always highs and lows, right? Like you miss targets sometimes. You got to let people go sometimes. There are interpersonal conflicts sometimes. There are growing pains when you're going from a one-person company to 3 to 5 to 10 to 20, new challenges that come up all the time. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And, for those people who are listening in right now, and who follow the company, who follow me on LinkedIn or other social platforms, you got to remember, like, you're just getting the highlight reel, like I'm only talking about this stuff that's going great. And for every highlight, there's usually a low light as well. So, I think one nightmare that still kind of haunts me to this day that's worth talking about is this is Black Friday, I think 2, maybe 3 years ago. I forget the date. I'm bad with dates. But Black Friday is like a huge, important time for our business. We run the best deals that we ever run. We try to get a lot of new students into the platform. And we were working with a third party to support our LMS, or basically like our course experience. And it was, the way it worked was that like some crazy authentication stuff that happens when we sign up users. So what we would do when someone signs up for our site is we would ping the API of this third party and do like a health check, because if their API wasn't working and we started signing up a user, they'd get stuck in this weird limbo and a bunch of stuff would break, right? So we had been like diving into like, how do we build a marketing plan? How do we build awareness and excitement around Black Friday? And we had done a great job because tons of users came to sign up when we made that announcement. The problem was, the more we started pinging that API with the health check, got to the point where that third party thought that they were being attacked. So they shut down their whole API, not just for us, for their entire customer base. They literally like stopped their API. And so no one could sign up on our platform. None of their other customers could sign up. And we had no idea what the heck was going on. And we were just like panicking, right? This is like a Thursday. We finally got in touch with this third party on Friday, like tried to smooth things over, but like it was too late to fix anything. So then we went into the weekend, and I just remember like the anxiety going through like Saturday and Sunday, and no one can sign up on our platform during the most important time of the year. And we got it fixed, I think probably Monday or Tuesday or something. It all worked out, but like, oh my gosh, like talk about stress as like a small business owner. And that's just the way it goes, right? Because you have to make hundreds of these build versus buy decisions when you're starting a company, and it's not realistic to build everything in-house. So you've got to rely on third parties and dependencies. And when you do that, like this is the risk you take. This is the kind of stuff that can happen. So not a fun day for me or for Maven Analytics.
Yeah, I remember that day too. I think it was, yeah. Anyway, we've talked about kind of the evolution of the team, right, of the people, and how do you start bringing in. How about just the product in itself, like the platform? It's changed a lot over the years too. So what have been some of your favorite, evolutions to our product, to our service? Can you talk about the decisions that led to making those changes, and if everything has worked out the way that you thought it would?
Yeah, there are a couple product features and things that I'm like proud of that I think set us apart. The very first one was guided learning, which is where we really wanted to pioneer that term and that concept of creating a much more curated and personalized learning experience, which is why when you sign up on our platform, the very first thing we ask is, what goals can we help you achieve? Because that's what the most important thing, like that's our core value. That's how we add value, by helping you achieve those goals. And then we help build very customized learning plans to help get there. And the reason I felt so strongly about guided learning in the early days was from my own learning experience, and not having a guided learning platform to support me. I remember trying to brush up on pivot tables like way back in the day. And I went to a platform, I'm not going to name names. It was an online learning platform, a big one. And I searched Excel pivot tables, and I got 10,000 results. And I'm like, geez, like, which one is the right course for me? Like, how do I know where to go from here? And so I wanted to simplify the learning experience for students and show them a path and give them that kind of expert support and guidance to help show them the way and, again, achieve that goal as seamlessly and efficiently as they possibly could. So that was like kind of a very big kind of product stance for us. One of the next big evolutions was really leaning into this concept of applied and practical learning. All of our courses since day one have focused on real world projects and practical applications. But recently, in the past year or two, we've taken it to the next level with our data playground, with curated data sets that and analytics prompts that people can use to practice putting their skills to the test. And more recently, guided projects, which let you actually solve real business cases using the tools that you're learning in our courses. And by integrating those guided projects into our learning paths, we're creating a much more effective learning experience, because you're not just learning and learning and learning and then forgetting half of what you've learned. You're not binge watching courses. You're learning, and then you're pausing to apply and practice. Then you're learning, then pausing to apply and practice. And that teaching pedagogy and methodology is so critical, and it's so important to help those concepts stick and help with knowledge retention. So that's one of my favorite parts of the platform. And then last thing I'll call out is just Showcase, which is our free portfolio hosting platform, which is huge, because for anyone who's looking to land a job or break into a career, but they don't have that actual real world experience to draw from, to put on their resume and stand out, a portfolio is one of the most powerful assets that you can build for yourself. And it helps level the playing field for those who are incredibly talented, but just don't have the track record yet because they're new. So we wanted to create a tool where people could showcase the work that they're proud of, take the projects that they're building in courses and through a guided project, and have a place to package them up and share them with peers and potential employers. So I think that's a good recap of, I think, some of the features that make our platform a little unique, and that I think make for a really unique and valuable experience for students.
So nice segue, I think, Chris. So teams evolved, products evolved. What's next, right? Where do you see the company going from here? And are there maybe any teasers that you can share with the audience that's with us today?
Maybe a couple teasers. I could probably tease a few things. As far as our course and content roadmap, we've got some really cool courses in the works that are queued up for Q4 of this year. We've got data and AI ethics coming out. We've got a new advanced SQL course coming out that talks about CTEs and window functions and subqueries and things like that. We've got a storytelling with data course that yours truly, you're working on right now, Enrique. We've got NLP, and one of the bigger kind of course and content evolutions that we're working towards now is starting to dig a bit deeper into the analytics engineering space. So some of you may have taken our Cloud Foundations course, which is kind of the precursor to that path. We're working on a Snowflake course right now, and we're hoping in 2025 to really build more content around technologies like AWS, Azure, GCP, Fabric, things like that. So that's like course and content updates. And then as far as the product itself is concerned, can't give away too much here, but I will say we're looking into some really exciting native community options to offer more peer-to-peer collaboration and learning opportunities inside of the platform. And we're going to be making some major strides as far as our LMS course experience are concerned. Some basic stuff like note-taking, bookmarking, searching for lesson level content, things like that. But it will be paving the way for some much bigger evolutions later on, things like AI-powered instantaneous feedback, new learning modes and modalities like IDEs and practice questions, tons of exciting stuff that we've got in the longer term roadmap from here.
Awesome. Well, that's very exciting, and I think it's a great time to kind of start segueing into the audience Q&A. So folks, if you can, keep those questions coming.
Let's see, here's one. Our Microsoft Fabric course is on the horizon. Not formally planned yet, but yes, we are hoping to introduce Fabric courses soon, hopefully early 2025, as part of that broader focus on analytics engineering. So that's an easy one. What's next for Maven from Catherine Taylor? I think I covered that one. Here's one. So did you anticipate the level of success you'd achieved and particularly impact on people's personal lives? No, definitely not. I've been very fortunate and pleasantly surprised at the reach of these courses. You know, in the early days when I taught my first course, my goal was, you know, maybe earn a few bucks on the side, you know, for, you know, beer money or what have you. And if it grew bigger than that, then that would be really cool. And if maybe someday it could contribute to like helping pay the rent, like that was the dream scenario, right? So in the early days, no, I had no expectation, even in my wildest dreams, that it would reach this many people. Like to have a million people, or almost 2 million people now who are taking these courses and putting these skills into practice is a very, very cool thing. And I am deeply, deeply grateful for everyone who's enrolled or taken any of our courses.
Love it. Here's an interesting one. I know you kind of teased about how we're all remote now. Was that always the case? Is there an office where we get together at Maven in the US?
So we use WeWorks, which is great because that means that no matter where we have our summits, we've got a space that can host us. Funny thing is, we actually didn't plan to be a remote company in the early days. Like many businesses, COVID kind of forced us down that path and made us realize, like, wow, this is actually pretty awesome. Like, let's keep doing this. We actually signed an office lease in January 2020, which like a week before everything shut down. So we had this annual office lease, and I think we used that space in Boston like 3 times maybe. So we had impeccable timing with that one. But we've got a space in Boston that sometimes we use. A big portion of our leadership team is here, and then we've been using co-working spaces in other cities to support other get-togethers and summits.
Nice. There's another one here. I know. So, Chris, I know we've kind of talked about your challenges as an entrepreneur, but when you were starting as an analyst, what was your greatest challenge and how were you able to tackle overcome it?
Good question. The greatest challenge. That's tough. One of the challenges, I think, for anyone entering this field is just trying to figure out how to focus and what tools and technologies to learn, because it's an overwhelmingly complex space. And if you compare yourself against others and you start looking at the tool landscape and thinking, oh my gosh, I need to learn Python, I've got to learn R, I've got to learn SAS, I've got to learn Power BI and Tableau, you're not going to get very far. So I think I kind of had that shiny object syndrome for a while where I felt like an obligation to learn all these tools. And then there was a really important moment in my early career where I said, you know what, I'm going to, instead of learning 10 things, decently well, I'm going to learn 2 or 3 things extremely well. So I chose to kind of narrow my focus and specialize. At that point for me, it was really Excel and SQL, and then later Power BI. And that's really the stack where I've leaned in hardest. So I think it's important to sometimes put the blinders on, focus on your own path and your own learning journey, and stay focused and don't try to do too much too fast.
Love it.
Here's one. When will the Maven provide a community for students to develop each other? It's on the roadmap. This is something we're really excited about building and piloting, hopefully very soon. So this one is definitely top of mind for our team right now.
How about this? What's your perspective to obtain certificates for different tools like Excel, SQL, Power BI?
Good question. Great question. I think they're important, but it's not everything. The thing that certificates will get you is kind of universal recognition, especially if you're talking about these, Microsoft backed or, company backed certificates like PL 300 or MO 201 or 211 or DP 600. Those are great signals to people. They're universally known as a good signal of skill, but certificates alone won't get the job done. I think they're part of a bigger picture that also needs to include a project portfolio and actual work that you've designed that you can showcase that capture your ability and your skills as a data professional. I think a lot of people get into this habit of just becoming course collectors and certificate collectors, and you've got to break out of that habit and, again, take time to put in reps, to practice, to build projects, because that's going to go a long way as well.
Yeah, and I will say, I guess a little biased because I teach our Excel certification course, but one thing that I think it does offer, and I agree with everything you said, Chris, is that it's at the least a confidence booster in that you know where the Microsoft drew the line at, like where expert knowledge kind of starts, and just being able to kind of complete their certification, I think gets, like, knowing that you're at least at that place can be great for your confidence. Although I will say sometimes they try to put in more of their features than necessary, and sometimes some that aren't really as relevant, just because they also kind of use it as a marketing tool to say, like, oh, here's everything we can do, even though not everything you should be doing. But I do think it's worth at least testing yourself to see if you're up to the test. I will say some of these are more expensive than others, so it's kind of a give or take. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Here's one, Enrique, that you can help answer. How do we come up with the challenges idea? How do we prepare a challenge? So you guys are talking to the challenge guy himself, Enrique. He's head honcho when it comes to designing and developing and promoting these challenges. So I'll let you take this one, Enrique.
Yeah, great question. It actually started with John Poller, our usual host, because he was looking for a way to, I think, drive LinkedIn engagement, right, and get people practicing the skills that they were learning through our courses. So once we had the data playground built, he figured what better way to get people to, downloading the data sets, putting them to good use, than challenging to analyze them, right? So I think he did the first few through LinkedIn. Back then, I think we were just almost drawing out the winner from a hat from participants. And when we were doing those, I remember I was watching the Queen's Gambit show on Netflix at the time. So I was kind of in a chess mindset. And I found a chess data set online, I think through Kaggle. And I thought, oh, it'd be a very interesting challenge to see, say you're playing against this fictional character. They open with the Queen's Gambit. Like, what's your next move to try to beat them? And how can you get that from analyzing this data set? So I remember reaching out to John saying, hey, I've got this idea for a challenge. I think Aaron was doing the next one with New Year's Eve data set. So he told me, we can do yours for, I think it was January, plus maybe even 2021. So way back in the day. And so I did. And then I just kept doing it ever since then. So how does that process go? It's hunting online for interesting data sets and then trying to come up with interesting prompts. And honestly, what drives me is just looking at all the amazing submissions that come in. I think when I first come up with a challenge, I kind of have an idea of what I'd like people to do with it, or maybe some, thoughts of what I'd do with a data set. And what people do is almost always much better than what I could have ever anticipated or even done myself. So it's very exciting just looking at the entries come in. But yeah, that's the process. We actually had one launched today. Fun data set, Halloween candy data set. So hope to see all of you in there as well.
Fun one.
Yeah.
And I think we got like 5 submissions for the very first challenge. And since then we've run them almost every month. And what's the total number now? Over 5,000 submissions, I think, at this point.
That must be. It's a great question. I do have it in there somewhere, but yeah, we get hundreds per challenge, and there's I think 36 challenges so far. This is the 36th or 35th. Yeah,
tons of fun. Here's one from Oscar. How can we purchase Maven swag in addition to the courses? We do have a shop. If you go to mavenanalytics.shop, we don't really promote it much, but you can grab some cool t-shirts and stuff. We don't sell this sweatshirt. Unfortunately, this is an exclusive Summit piece. But we do have a shop where you can get stuff, and we do have incentives and discounts that you unlock when you complete like course milestones and things like that.
Right. It looks like we're pretty much at time. So before everyone starts to drop off, Chris, thank you so much for joining, sharing your story with the world. I know I'd heard some of these anecdotes, but it's always fun to hear them again and to get, people kind of more in tune into, how Maven has grown and how you've grown along with it. And we all have. So thanks for your time. And thanks everyone for joining. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Please feel free to reach out to me. Let's connect. If I didn't get a chance to answer your question here, send me a DM, message me on LinkedIn or anywhere else you could find me. And I'd love to keep the conversation going. But this was a ton of fun. Thank you for hosting, Enrique. It's cool being on this side of the curtain for a change. And this was a blast. So thanks everyone who took the time to join.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.